I'm Jana with Purl Together. I just wanted to do a quick tutorial video for Ambah's Radvent Throw pattern. I'm going to show you how I cast on just the way the pattern says, and also give you an option to do the pinhole cast on, which I think creates a really tidy little zipped up little cast on that's sturdy. Now the long tail cast on absolutely works just fine. I also have a couple of tips for you for keeping those yarn overs at the end of your double points from sliding off inadvertently, and also why I'm choosing to use double points this time instead of my usual magic loop. Now, if you've been a viewer of the channel for a while, you know I love my magic loop, but there are some times like this where double points might be a little more advantageous. Let's get started. Okay, we're going to begin with a long tail cast on. Now I do have a more in-depth video about the long tail cast on my channel, and I'll put a link to that down below. Now a lot of people do the long tail cast on with just one hand, and they do this crazy acrobatic thing with their left hand. I'm not that great. I learned to do the long tail cast on like this, where I just pinch the yarn here, go around the top, make a triangle kind of, put my needle up through, wrap it, my knit, wrap counterclockwise as you're knitting, and then I just slip that over the top. Now that's how I learned. I started with a slip knot, by the way. That's how I learned. A lot of people do it with one hand, and you do whatever long tail cast on, however you learn. So there's 4. We're going to start with 8. I'm going to go ahead and put all 8 on my needle here in the beginning. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. Now another way to go about this, if you don't want to put all 8 on in the beginning, is if you're using double points, you can totally lay that second double point right next to it and cast on however many you're going to on your second one, whether that's 2 or 3 or whatever. Cinch that up pretty good and tight, and then you already have them separated, okay? You could absolutely do that. So whether you're using magic loop or whether you're using double points, this is how I'm going to start. Now I normally prefer to knit with 4 double points, and my working needle is the 5th. And I will do that eventually, but things are kind of fiddly in the beginning. I've left myself, by the way, 6 or 8 inch tail, 4 inch tail. Just leave yourself a little bit of a tail. Like don't cut it so short that it's only like 2 inches, because you might need to tighten things up later. So I'm going to start with the first stitch that I cast on, and I'm going to separate these onto 3 needles. I will use my 4th one in a bit, but I find it a little bit easier to do this with just 3 initially. I think it's easier to control 3 and have the 4th one as my working needle in the beginning, just to try to keep everything as tight as I can just from the get-go. So now I want to make sure that I don't have anything twisted here, okay? So you can tell everything is correct. My little cast on edge is all toward the center of my circle here. And I'm going to straighten everything up so all the stitches are in the middle of my needles. Okay, turn this around so your working yarn is coming off the top like you'd like it to be. The way that I'm going to join this into the round is I'm going to just tie a knot. I'm going to take the tail end, which is here. I'm going to put my other double pointed needle up into the last stitch because I want to join the first and the last stitch. So I'm going to take the tail into the back so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take my remaining double point, if I can hang on to it, and get this down to the tip to give myself some slack, because I am trying to keep this as tight as possible. And I want this stitch to elongate out as much as I can help it. And then I'm going to take my tail and I'm just going to wrap it around that clockwise, and I'm going to draw it through. So all I've done is taken the tail and I'm drawing it through the last stitch to join the first and the last stitch. Hope that makes sense. Actually, joining the last stitch to the first one. So hopefully you can see that I've taken that tail end right through that stitch. Let me scooch everything back down so I don't lose anything. And then I'm just going to simply tie a square knot with the working yarn and the tail. So if you're not sure about a square knot, just Google that. It's like you're just making a granny knot, but it's left over right and then the opposite way, right over left. And I'm going to give that a little tug. Don't pull it so tight you're distorting the yarn or anything, but I definitely do want it to be secure. Okay, so I made sure that everything was straight. So you want to double check that everything is straight. It's not too late to start over if you need to. And then I'm going to start with round 1 on the right side. This is my right side, and I'm going to do exactly what it tells me. Knit 1 yarn over, knit 1 yarn over twice, repeat that 4 times for a total of 16 stitches. And there's no getting around it. This first little bit is going to be fiddly, but just be patient with yourself. So there's a knit 1 and a yarn over. I'm going in for number 2 here. When I do this, I'm just ignoring. I'm letting those other 2 double points just flop around, and that's totally okay. They can just do their thing, and I'm not worried about it. All right, so then there's a knit 1, and I am going to end this needle on a yarn over. It's okay, just go ahead and do it like normal. And then you want to be mindful when you're moving to your second needle that you don't lose this yarn over here that you've just done. And I know it looks weird and it's going to feel precarious, like you're losing that yarn over. What I do is I leave it on there and I kind of trap it here. As I'm moving things around, I'm going to trap my yarn between my middle and first finger just so that I don't drop off that yarn over that I just made back here. I don't want it to slip off the edge. Okay. Then I'm going to get my working needle again and go move on to the second double point. Sorry, off camera there. Now I know I ended with a yarn over right there. I'm going to go ahead and do my next knit stitch right away so I can know that everything is secure. Okay, now do another yarn over. And again, I know it's fiddly and it's weird and it feels like you're going to lose everything, but you just have to take it slow and find some strategies that work for you, like pinching that yarn with your left hand when you move to a new needle. So we're going to do that again, where I'm going to do a yarn over, and I know I don't want it to fall off, so I'm going to go ahead and slide my double point up. Make sure you're in the middle of all your double points so that you don't lose anything off the end. And I know that my last double point only had 2 stitches on it, and that's here. Trust me, it will become less fiddly as you go along. There's my yarn over. So I need to, if that falls off, I know that I gotta have a yarn over at the end. So I'm just gonna put it right back on, hold that with my left hand while I get my working needle situated around and start this last one. Now, double points, granted, are fiddly and pokey. However, if you do the beginning of this pattern with double points rather than magic loop, you may find that you have less ladders and gaps between your chart repeats. So I did this the first time with magic loop and it was fine, and those ladders will work out. It was fine, and that you can cinch them up if you want, but I find that something like this is much tighter if I'm using double points rather than magic loop in the beginning. And the reason for that is if you're using magic loop, all of your stitches are going to be on 2 needles. So there's going to be quite a gap here and here if these were the cables and I was magic looping. Instead, I have at least 3 and I will add a 4th, and I have less room to travel around at the end, if you will. So I may switch to magic loop after I get a few rounds on here, or I may stay and just do the whole thing with my little bamboo double points. Okay, so with this last yarn over that I have, which I'm going to hold down here with my left hand, I'm going to count and make sure that I have 16 all the way around. There's 6 on each of these, so that's 12, and 4 here is 16, so I'm good to go. Now with round 2 and all the even rounds, you just knit. So that's handy. We're going to have a resting round, if you will. Oh, see, that slid off, but I knew that it did because I was watching, so that's all right. And I'm going to go ahead and start. Watching me do this has got to be super awkward. I apologize for that, but again, it will get better by the time we just get 2 or 3 rounds on here. It will be fine. Now, the other thing I'm going to do, particularly with the second stitch, is just give that a good little tug so you minimize any laddering that's going to go on between your double points potentially. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and knit around. I'm about to begin round 3, and already things are looking better and easier to control and just more manageable. So again, we're going to do round 3, and you're going to have some yarn overs to watch for at the ends of your double points. But one thing I wanted to show you too about evening out your tension between them is you can tell that I just knitted into quite a large loop that was a yarn over from, round 1. But you can manage that by, giving the second one a little bit of a tug. You can even things out. Okay, now, see, I wasn't paying attention. I should have done a yarn over right there. And now I'm going to knit 3. But I'm going to give that a little bit of a tug, and then that's going to take up some slack here in this first stitch that also takes up some slack between my double points. So you can widen things out a little bit, work on evening things out as you go across the row. See there, I'm talking and not paying attention. I should have done a knit 1, a yarn over, and then just knit 3. Okay. So what all I'm saying is you can even that out across the row by giving things a little bit of a tug and making that loop a little bit larger. I mean, not super large, but a little. Now we're going to do another yarn over, and we're going to repeat that. So I'm going to knit on, and I'll show you what mine looks like after a few more rounds. Okay, I'm on row 7, and you'll notice I switched yarn. This is actually my day 1 Advent. I was filming earlier with the green just because I thought it showed up better on the needles. And I was cruising along, and I started my own project, but there's one more thing I wanted to show you. So disregard the color of the yarn, the principle is still the same. So I'm at the end of my first chart repeat of row 7, or the end of my first needle, which for me, I've arranged this in such a way that my repeats correspond with how many needles I have. So that's really easy. You can put a beginning of the round marker if you like, right here. Actually, my beginning of the round is back here. And I know that because that's where my tail is. But if that's difficult or weird for you to see, just put a little locking stitch marker at the beginning. So now is where I'm going to have that yarn over at the end of the needle. So what I've been doing is do your yarn over and then push all the stitches down into the middle. Now you can let that go, and it's really not going to go anywhere unless your project falls off or your cat gets a hold of it or whatever. Then, go in as you're starting your next knit. Now, this is coming off the top, and it's really not going to go anywhere. The other thing that I do when I'm not filming is I kind of turn everything so that my working needle is up, and all the others just kind of fall away, really. There's my yarn over, and now I'm going to do the next knitting section. But what I wanted you to specifically be aware of is pushing all of those stitches down to the middle of the needle before you move on to the next one. So there's my yarn over right there on that needle, and I'm going to push all the stitches down to the center so this yarn over is less likely to fall off. And you know that when you go progress to the next needle, your yarn needs to be coming off the front of this one because that's a yarn over, and then you'll pull it around the back and thereby create the yarn over. And see how I just pinch that right there until I get my next needle set up, and then I'm on my way. The same is going to be true for if you're using magic loop, where you're going to, make sure that yarn over is coming off the correct side of the cable when you switch to the other side of your needle, if you're magic looping. I transferred everything to magic loop for a minute because I wanted to show you why, depending on who you are and how your tension is, why maybe magic loop isn't the best idea for this project. Now, one thing is your cable is going to want to spring away from itself, so that could potentially create a ladder situation here. Now, you can mitigate that by cinching it up, making sure everything is super tight, but that's natural for the cables to want to go boing. So you'll have to decide if that works okay for you, or if you can help that or not. Same thing is going to happen at the beginning of your round. You're going to have to be really mindful of, pulling that stitch really tight and making sure it's all good. Magic loop might be a little faster on the sides, though, to knit. Now I have 2 chart repeats on each half. So you'll just have to, fuss with it a little bit and see what you like the best and what works best, what you think looks the best for your own knitting style and tension. So in conclusion, I think I'll stick with dpns, at least initially. And you have to work out your own system, like I've been saying. But it just seems to me that I'll have fewer ladders between. There's less stress between the needles if doing it this way. But again, be mindful that if you switch back and forth between materials, sometimes people's gauges change between knitting with dpns or magic loop or tiny circulars, or even your gauge and your tension can change within different materials such as bamboo or metal. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please consider a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss any of our videos this month, especially the daily vlogs. And I'll be uploading some more tutorials as we go along as well. Thanks so much for watching.